And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, him.
Oh, good morning, bro. I'm back to the great state of Florida. I'm sure you've missed it.
I definitely missed it. Florida's New York's not looking too good these days, my friend. Just not where it was. Absolutely not. Very happy to be back in the free state of Florida. And they actually added the sign as you come in. Welcome to the free state of Florida.
Well, it is America. It's funny that you say that because it just happened to be. I think it was yesterday or the other day. I was scrolling through the social media, the internet, probably looking at Kaz Daughtry's comments. But anyway, I saw this thing came up. It's like the states where everyone's leaving and the states that everyone's going to, and of course California and New York are at the top of the list. It's the Great Escape, and Texas and Florida. It seems like those are the two touchdown states. And the other state that's coming up is Tennessee. I know a lot of people going to Tennessee. That's a great spot too. But I don't know if you want to tell anybody about your experience when you first got home, because that's pretty wild. I know you're tired, you're driving, you get home, and boom, you got a little surprise.
Forget. I don't even want to complain. I am going to complain about one thing though. I changed my photo on Instagram and then on Twitter. So on Twitter, it actually removed my premium, my check mark. So we're not live on Twitter right now. We're live on Instagram. We're live on Rumble. We're live on YouTube. We're live on Twitch. We're live on a few other platforms. But anybody that wants to interact with us, definitely go over to YouTube, like and subscribe, and drop comments there so we can see them. Other than that, we really can't. I can't see it at this point, and we're not up on X, just so you know, Eric. So what do you want to get into today?
Listen, let's get right into it. New York City installs gun detection technology in the subways. I mean, this is a great discussion. Eventually, we're going to have to get our buddy Bunny Fuzz on this. Craig, how you doing, brother? Because I know this is something he definitely wants to weigh in on. Safety over liberty. This is interesting. This really, for me, this touches home because intrusive police work was the bedrock and foundation to the type of police work we were doing. You were an anti-crime sergeant, especially special operations lieutenant in the South Bronx. Intrusive police work was pinnacle to public safety, especially in the South Bronx. So some of the illegal firearms out there that led to shootings. And we faced an extreme amount of opposition from civil liberties unions, advocates, anti-police sentiment, New York City Council, and overzealous civilian complaint review board. I mean, I became the most complained cop at doing my job, doing intrusive police work. But the margin of error with that, I think, is far better than when it comes to gun detection technology in subways, which I think we really have to discuss what you and I were talking about a couple of days ago, is safety over liberty. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
100%. First of all, I just want to give a shout out to Luis Paulino. He said he wishes the NYPD had higher ups like you guys. Still men, appreciate
Thanks,
that.
Brother. Thank you.
We'll be there. There's still men in the NYPD. They'll get there. Rough times. May is a temporary. Administration's a temporary. We'll get there. So, safety of liberty. So, we were doing anti-crime. We were doing proactive policing. We weren't just taking away people's constitutional rights and saying, oh, we need to do this. We need to stop you and toss you so that you could have safety, which is what the progressives painted stop, question, frisk, and broken windows to be. Oh, you need to keep us safe. You need to stop us to keep us safe. It's like, no, we need to stop people who commit crimes from committing larger crimes. So that's not anything to do with constitutionality or freedom over safety. I choose freedom every time over safety. I think most of us Americans do. I think the average people who support the founding of this nation, who love America, are going to choose freedom over safety every day. Right? I don't need Eric Adams to keep me safe. His idea is more than likely not going to keep me safe, and it's only going to take away my rights. Right? So, again, we did away with stop, question, and frisk. And I never cared. My bigger thing was screw stop, question, and frisk. We need to be able to police minor crimes through broken windows, and there should be consequences, and not heavy consequences. If you're smoking pot, that doesn't mean you should go to jail. Maybe you spend the night in jail. Maybe you're out drinking in public, you get a ticket, you punch someone in the face, maybe you spend the weekend in jail. If they're not seriously injured, there should be some type of consequence for action. But we remove that. We demonize stop, question, and frisk, and now we throw this technology into New York City subways to keep you safe. And what are we doing? We're stop, question, and frisk everybody. Because not only are you walking through that, we have a ton of cops there, by the way. So now we're going to keep this subway transit plan. We're going to keep all the cops down in the tunnels, and they're going through women's bags as they're coming back from work. And I personally think it's a waste of time. I personally think the people that are going to get stopped are the easy targets. The people who New York City commuters are concerned with are going to find a different way around, and they're not going to go through those turnstiles, nor are they going to be stopped.
You nailed it. You nailed it, brother. I mean, absolutely. I was targeted for doing intrusive police work when it came to stop, question, and possibly frisk. Like, I'm a huge advocate for stop, question, possibly frisk. I think that component is a major component. It's not the only one, but it's a major component and a contributory factor towards curbing crime. I think it does alleviate shootings, alleviates violent crime. But what do we have when we have stop, question, possibly frisk? We have the human element to it. We have trained police officers that have the eye, the observation skills, and the experience to understand how that's the Supreme Court case of People versus Du Bois works under the U.S. Constitution, so that police officers are accurately doing it to the best of their ability. When we stop, question, possibly frisk adversaries, potential perpetrators, are we sometimes wrong? Absolutely. But there is a margin of error there, which is, I think, far better when it comes to something like this. Because who suffers when you put gun detection scanners in the subway? Not the potential perpetrators, because this is a flag. The adversaries, the potential perpetrators, know to now evade the transit system where the gun detection scanners are going to be placed. And I understand that supposedly they're not going to know it's going to be mobile and moved around. Well, it's very arbitrary, and people will be able to find out the information easily. People start to spread that information on social media where their scanners are. I wouldn't be surprised if there be some counter app that is eventually developed that will determine where the scanners are to acknowledge and let people know where these scanners are. But stop, question, possibly frisk is a fantastic tool. And what you're talking about in comparison, which I think you're right, is low-level crimes when you have probable cause for a low-level infraction, which you could be intrusive that will lead to another crime. But I think it's important that we respect the U.S. Constitution, respect Supreme Court cases like People versus Du Bois, which gives cops the rights to be intrusive based on a four-tiered system. But that comes with observation skills. I wouldn't expect anyone to just utilize that court case to stop people, but trained police officers utilize it, and we're not stopping everyone. Contrary to popular belief from the progressives, because I was told in numerous conversations, and it was also smeared in the newspapers, that the type of police work that I did was a way to the ends justify the means, which is absolutely not right. We utilized the Supreme Court case properly, but this is just so intrusive. I think also, again, it's interesting. You put up this tweet here from Kaz Daughtry. And Kaz Daughtry, he doesn't realize it because of his inept ability to actually utilize social media, but he boxes himself in. And he boxes himself in with these direct statements. And these statements that he puts out, really, he doesn't even realize that he's in line with defund the police. He's in line with replacing police officers with AI. You can never replace the ability, the observation skills of the human element of trained police officers. But again, we have to look at the dichotomy, the intrusiveness of the human element or the intrusiveness of a scanner, which a scanner is going to be intrusive on everyone that's utilizing that transit system. And who's going to utilize that transit system with a gun detection scanner is good, obliging citizens, not potential perpetrators.
Kaz Daughtry is a moron. So 5EO, no, this isn't our first live cast. We've done several of them. We will be discussing the Randall's Island incident a little bit. And Franco, you can get a carry permit, a concealed carry permit in New York City. It's hard. One Police Plaza is currently blocking a lot of the applications and they're slowing them down. But like we said, we have the unconstitutional law where to commute on New York City subways and buses, or even sit at a bus stop or on a train station, is a sensitive location. I did a podcast about that one, and it's basically illegal even if you have a concealed carry permit. Retired cops, for any of you cops that are listening to this, or police officers, are exempt from that law. I think the whole thing's unconstitutional. So I agree with you. An armed society is a safe society. That's why I live in Florida now, where anyone could really get a firearm at this point. But yeah, I think when you look at this tweet, let's read this tweet from Kaz Daughtry. Happening now. This city's leadership, as well as the leaders across the nation, held a conference to address security updates in the New York City transit system. The New York subway is a true lifeline. Commuters deserve excellent, reliable, and most importantly, a safe transit system. NYPD leads the way in 21st century policing. We are consistently harnessing the latest technology to keep this city safe. These newly adopted state-of-the-art scanners are able to differentiate between firearms and everyday items. They will allow for precision policing. They will assist our dutiful officers in keeping New Yorkers safe. And to those who would try to bring violence to our community, see that the finest will always be thinking ahead. The future of policing is here in New York City. So I think it just shows, this statement really just shows how inept Kaz Daughtry really is. He literally is not looking at the big picture. He's not looking at the big picture. He's putting technology ahead of civil liberties. He's not even thinking about civil liberties. This was the guy that thought he could fly a drone over your backyard when he's sitting in there, see how many people you have in your backyard, so that they could come down and the heavy hand of policing could come down on you. So now, to enter the subway, you must get scanned. You must get scanned, your bag searched, right? Why are we just indiscriminately searching everyone that gets on New York City subways? Because of the inability of New York City mayor and his appointed management to properly police crime down in the subways. That's why you're getting searched. And not only are you getting searched, you're walking through these scanners. And you're going to get scanned if you're a commuter. I used to take the subway all the time. Sometimes I would be on the subway like 4 times in a day. So let's just say you commute to and from work. You're on the subway twice in a day. You get scanned twice in a day. What are the health effects on your body of walking through those scanners twice a day? I guarantee that wasn't looked at. I guarantee nobody looks at that. And now you have no way of taking transportation without giving up your civil liberties. I think that this is an egregious overstep. And I think I got something else besides it being an overstep. I don't think it'll do anything to deter violence in the subways whatsoever. I don't think it'll deter anything from having guns down in New York City subways whatsoever. The only thing this is doing is winning the battle of perception amongst the media and amongst commuters when they get in major hubs in New York City. Because I got news for you. This is a pilot program, and this is not going to go into every transit subway. It's not going to go to the ones in the Bronx and Brooklyn and the Queens. You're not going to see these scanners everywhere. So if you feel, oh, daddy, govern me harder so I could be safe, I got news for you. You're not going to be safe. You're just going to get daddy govern you harder.
I don't see this making any difference in curbing crime for New York City. But what's interesting about this also is Mayor Eric Adams has stood on a soapbox and he's indicated that crime is down in New York City, and that perception versus reality is a big deal going on right now, and that people's psyche plays on them right now because of social media and the crimes that they hear that's going on in New York City, and it's really their perception, it's not reality. Well, if that was the case, if crime was down, and his plan was so effective by bombarding the train stations with omnipresence, putting police officers, displacing police officers from other locations of the city into the subway system. If this plan was so effective in working, Why would we need these scanners? And again, it's quite interesting that Michael Kemper, the chief of transit for the NYPD, testified to New York City Council that approximately 97% of the fare evaders are not frisked. They're not searched, because that was a concern for the New York City Council. New York City Council was concerned to make sure that there's no intrusion on the residents of New York City, the strap hangers, the passengers. But yet 100% of the transit passengers will now be scanned. And if you're a perpetrator, if you're carrying an illegal firearm, are you now going to utilize the subway system? I mean, Mayor Eric Adams, don't you realize there's other forms of public transportation in New York City? There's other forms of modes of transportation to get around New York City other than the subway system. If I had a legal firearm, if I'm a perpetrator, I mean, that's funny. It's also insulting, to people. They think that these perpetrators are stupid, and they're not stupid. They're smart. I mean, their job is to evade the police, to not get caught. Obviously, they're not going to utilize the transit system, or at least the transit system where the scanners are. Again, that's why I say I believe this. I wouldn't be surprised if some app or something is developed to counteract this scanner system where people are informed of where these scanners are. I don't think it's going to do any impact or have any effect for public safety. All it's going to do is impact the good, obliging citizens of New York City and impede on their constitutional rights. I believe in freedom, and I do believe in safety. I believe in there's a balance. I believe that that's why I took pride when I was a New York City police officer, sergeant, special operations lieutenant, in constantly reading and staying current on Supreme Court cases so that I understand that myself. I would teach it to my men and women so that we conduct and perform police work properly under the U.S. Constitution, properly under these Supreme Court cases, like the case of People versus DeVore. I constantly bring that up because that case was pinnacle to the type of police work that I did. That was a 4-tiered system that was developed in 1976 so that police officers, when they wear that shield, can be intrusive. If you reasonably suspect someone is about to commit a crime, that's where you have the right to detain them. But a scanner is not about reasonably detecting someone commits a crime. It's scanning everyone. And I'm so glad that you brought that up. What are the potential medical ramifications for the scanner? Is there radiation exposure? Is there any type of exposure that can be harmful to the body? I think there's a big dichotomy also. I think some people might have the ideology that is kind of on par when you go to TSA and you're taking a flight. But that's quite different because taking a flight, for the most part, is a luxury. And when you take a flight, you're pretty much signing a contract that says that you are going to get scanned. And that is a measure of safety for the entire country. That's at a national level. We've to also combat potential terrorism. But this here, again, is the conversation of safety over liberty. And I think this just completely takes away liberty. And it's interesting about Kaz Daughtry. He doesn't realize he's now the czar of technology for the police force. And again, he boxed himself in with that statement. He doesn't see the big picture with it. I don't think he wrote that himself, but all he cares that he has some type of legacy. And that's what he wants to be known as, the Commissioner of Technology.
He definitely, the dutiful officers, he definitely didn't write that. So, I mean, I 100%. As I was reading it, I was like, yeah, right. A couple of people, Donald Cannon's asking, quick question for LEOs. Would it be concealed if you go through those metal detectors and they go off? No, obviously you're right. I mean, and I think Luis is getting into it too a little bit. So where's your right as an active or a retired officer, or even a concealed carry? Well, again, concealed carry holders it's illegal to carry on New York City subways as of right now, as of this unconstitutional law. I'm hoping that gets overturned at some point. But where is your right to actually conceal? Because now, as you're going up to travel on New York City subways, you're going to be spotted, right? What are you going to have to do? You're going to have to show your ID. You're going to have to go around the scanner. So everyone's going to know you're on. Everyone's going to assume you're a police officer or a retired police officer. Where's your ability to conceal and your ability to remain safe? But I think overall, what the scanners really do is, and Eric touched on it, is it deters law-abiding, legal gun owners from wanting to take their firearms in the subways. I know myself. Like, I get lazy. I'm like, I don't want to deal with it. I'll leave it home. I'll leave it somewhere else. I'll go jump on the subway because I don't want to deal with it. I'll just run through the thing, boom. And that's what the majority of people are going to do. And those questions aren't going to be answered by the city of New York. We'll find out those answers. We'll let you guys know, like, what it is, like what is happening in New York City and what the trends are. But I'll be honest with you right now. At this point, it's meant to deter legal gun owners more than it's ever going to do away with, away with people illegally carrying firearms. Eric, I want to play a video for you, and I want to get your thoughts. This came out yesterday. I think you guys are just gonna be like, "What the hell is going on there?" All right, here we go. This is a body camera video. New York City subways. This is how safe New York City subways are. This is how scared criminals are to carry illegal firearms in New York City.
You all right? Everything good? You good? Yes. Hands behind your back. Hands behind your back.
Again, I talk about this quite often, right? The men and women that are out there right now, the police officers of the NYPD, they're doing what they're paid and trained to do, and they're doing their job according to the crime trend, according to what's brought in front of them. And that's why it's funny that the so-called dream team in khaki pants. Listen, I'm sure there's a lot of good kids in there. There's a lot of people with good hearts, and they want to do real police work. And for those that have interaction with us saying that this is by far the best teams out there getting firearms. John, when you and I were out there doing special operations work, it was a lot more difficult to get firearms. And the firearms were out there. The illegal firearms were out there, but people knew that there were consequences. There was no bail reform. They knew that there were consequences. They knew if they were caught with an illegal firearm, they'd possibly face up to 3 years in jail, which is in complete opposition comparison to what's going on right now. So you had to do some real work for it. I mean, look at this. This kid's just laying there. It looks like maybe he's intoxicated. He's taking a nap. He could care less. His gun is right in his waistband. He's not even trying to hide it. It's just there's so many firearms out there right now. It's like a needle in the haystack right now. And that's what people have to understand, right? Mayor Eric Adams and the administration right now, the NYPD, would gaslight you and sell you this idea that they're getting so many firearms and it's making you safer out there. This should be a red flag to you. When the police department is getting more firearms now than ever, what that's telling you is there's more illegal firearms in the streets. Because for every time they make an apprehension and you recover an illegal firearm like you see right here, I mean, this is just ridiculous. It's so blatant. How many illegal firearms are missed? Again, it's a needle in the haystack. We do our job as best as possible, but the cops, they do the job that's presented to them. And clearly, there's a crime problem going on right now. I mean, this kid just blatantly is not even trying to hide it. It's right in his waistband, and he could care less. I wouldn't be surprised if he has several gun charges, and he's probably out right now. Who knows? Most likely, he's probably facing other gun charges in court right now that he has zero adverse consequence to face because of bail reform, because of legislation, and because of weak leadership in the NYPD, and also at the behest of Mayor Eric Adams. This right here is actually a great display of what's going on in New York City. And do you think he's going to pass through the gun detection scanners? I think not.
There's definitely not going to be gun detection scanners where he's going to go. So again, like the gun detection scanners, one, I believe that unconstitutionally violates civil liberties. Two, it's completely has nothing to do with safety. It's only about perception. It's only about fighting the battle of perception. And you're seeing this clear as day. This kid has zero fear of the consequence of carrying an illegal firearm in New York City. And rightfully so. Rightfully so that he has no fear, because we've given history tells us exactly what what's happening is that these people are remaining uncharged. They're being allowed to walk free. And cases are being dropped down the road. But when we move over to legal gun ownership, if somebody 3D prints a piece of a firearm or prints a firearm that doesn't have a serial number, where this person's not a danger to society, this person's never been arrested, there's absolutely no reason to believe that this person's a threat to the society. They might even be elderly at this point. We're bringing down the weight of the law on these people. If you're a retired law enforcement officer and you're on New York City subways and your shirt lifts up because you fell asleep, you better believe you're going to face higher penalties and higher consequences than this piece of garbage right here, laying here with an illegal firearm on the staircase, sleeping like nothing happened. That's the state of New York City now. That's the state of it. New York City is a pro-criminal state. Law-abiding citizens, watch out, we're coming for you.
You know what's interesting about this, right? This is like the quintessential case that we could actually apply to how ridiculous the How Many Stops Act that was implemented by Jumaane Williams. Because this encounter is a great training tool for police officers and the public to actually understand the Supreme Court case I constantly talk about, which is People versus DeBoer, which is a system. So clearly you can see the police officers are approaching this potential subject. At this point, you can see they're approaching him. He's sitting on the stairs, right? Where he's impeding. He could be impeding pedestrian traffic. There's no pedestrian traffic at this point, but so according to People versus DeBoer, now I can't tell if they saw the firearm immediately as they're walking towards him, but let's assume they didn't, because you see when he starts to move, that's when the hoodie goes up and they see the firearm. So if we go by the case of People versus DeBoer, their initial interaction would be at a level 1, which is request for information. And in request for information, you need an objectable reason to approach. And that would be an objective reason to approach. We have someone who's sitting on the stairs who could be impeding pedestrian traffic for transit, which is going to be cumbersome. So as the police officers approach, if he did not have a firearm, their interaction of approaching him would lead to a level 1 encounter under the How Many Stops Act. And that would have to be documented. It just shows how ridiculous. And I just want to say that because reflect on the fact that you said it's a criminal first society. And criminals are the priority in New York City. Absolutely. So in a case like this would not have to be documented under the normally this would not have to be documented under People versus DeBoer, because you have a level 1 encounter, which is a objective reason to approach, and immediately as the shirt goes up, they see the firearm, you have probable cause to make an arrest. So, and there would be no paperwork documented other than actual arrest paperwork. But because of Jumaane Williams and proposals like that, if he did not have a firearm, and I guess because they approach him at a level 1, according to Jumaane Williams and that bill of How Many Stops Act, they'll have to do a paperwork or some type of documentation for that level 1 encounter and their arrest paperwork. It just shows how ridiculous that act is, and just it's silly because they don't understand police work. But this is a great job by the police officers. Exactly, I used to teach my men and women People versus DeBoer. This is again like a quintessential case. It's almost textbook. They approach him, objective reason approach, shirt goes up, probable cause. Great job, police officers. I appreciate it. If you're watching this, that's good work.
Yeah, and that's the problem with decriminalization of things like loitering, disorderly conduct, blocking pedestrian traffic, because you should be at a level, you should actually be at a level 3. You're actually at probable cause. You should be at probable cause right the minute you see him laying on the steps. That should be probable cause. It shouldn't even come into that. But the decriminalization of crimes in New York City is leaving where criminal acts now, you have to follow this 4-step process when he's a nuisance to the New York City transit riders, right? He's clearly a nuisance. He's sleeping on the subway stairs like it's nobody's business. But I think that it's a good job by the police officers. I'm not knocking the police officers at all. But this picture right here is a highlight in the failure in public safety. When you look at the weekly stats of the amount of guns that the NYPD takes off of New York City streets, that is another highlight in the failure in public safety in the Adams administration and in the progressive left, both in New York City Council, State Assembly, and the State Senate. Those are complete failures where we've removed the fear and the consequence of carrying illegal firearms. So everyone's carrying illegal firearms on New York City streets, except for law-abiding citizens. And this is the problem with the freedom over safety, right? You harm the good people. You harm the good people saying you're going to keep them safe from bad actors when really you're empowering bad actors and you're stripping people away of their ability to protect themselves, law-abiding citizens. And that's what's happening. That's New York. That's what this is. So the future is now. Kaz, if you're watching this, I know you'll probably watch this at some point later, but if you're watching this, I just want to let you know, you should look at the history of how the police department found the Evolve scanners, and you would see it points directly back to myself. I was asked in 2018 or 2019 if there was any gun detection equipment for people entering buildings. They never told me it had anything to do with the subways, because obviously even the owner of this company said it really wasn't set up for subways. And I understand when you're entering a building, when, though that's private property, but I don't understand it when I'm entering something that I need to go to work. I need to commute to get there. You're basically removing my constitutional right and my ability to travel without giving up my rights. This is just like the mandate, in my opinion, another unconstitutional thing.
Well, absolutely. And also, I was actually thinking about it. I mean, this is on a smaller level, but I was just curious. How are undercover police officers going to navigate the subways? Because in the subway system, we have undercover police officers, and we should. But how are they going to navigate this system? I mean, they can't just go through the gate and show their ID. It's absolutely ridiculous. And undercover police officers do carry firearms. So I'm interested, and that's why I would love to have Kaz Daughtry and John Schell on this podcast, especially Kaz Daughtry, because he is the czar of technology for the police. He's really pushing AI technology. He's pushing drones. He's clearly behind this. So that's why I love to have him on this podcast. And it's quite interesting that he's avoided this podcast, and John Schell, and they go on all different podcasts and pretty much a media tour. And some of the podcasts they go on, they don't have any traction. And this podcast has some great media traction in New York City, even the entire country. And the fact that he's evaded these type of questions or these conversations just shows his lack of ability to actually lead the police department and actually be transparent. So it's a great opportunity to have these discussions. If he has become the commissioner of technology, then stand by your position, and you should be willing to have these conversations, because I would like to know how are undercover officers going to navigate this. Again, I think you brought up a great point. Good card carrying Americans that have the Second Amendment right to conceal carry. Why shouldn't you carry your firearm in transit? It's a public location. Again, it's just absolutely ridiculous. I think this is a complete dichotomy. I'm sure people are trying to reflect this on what's going on at TSA and the airports, but it's just completely different. An airport, when you go through security, that's a private location. You're paying a company to actually take the flight. You understand it's part of the contract that you're going to be checked. I just think it's absolutely ridiculous. I want to say to the police officer in this particular interaction, I'm sure this is happening quite often. I'm confident that this is the common theme of policing going on right now in New York City. I saw it towards the end of the tenure of my career. It was so easy to get firearms the last couple of years. It was ridiculous. You don't even have to work hard. You don't even have to have those observational skills to have a great record of firearm arrests, because that's what you need to go into special operations unit, the detective squad, to have firearm arrests. And it just became so easy. And I'm not knocking these police officers. They did their job. But that really is the quintessential case. For anybody that's in the police academy, I think that's a great video to actually show you the recruits. And that's a great video to correlate the people versus the board case. But I think what's interesting also is, I'd like to reflect on what you said, John. I think that's fantastic. The decriminalization that we see in New York City is reflective in that interaction also, because before the decriminalization, we could arguably say that actions are disorderly conduct, impeding pedestrian traffic of transit passengers, which immediately would be probable cause, and he would be cited a summons, and summons is in lieu of an arrest. So, which give probable cause for a frisk and potentially a search. If the person doesn't have any ID, they could be removed to the precinct, and an illegal firearm would be apprehended. But I think it was around the time of 2018, John, where in New York City there was a Supreme Court case that changed disorderly conduct. So, in order to actually make that have that interaction under disorderly conduct, or to issue that summons, or to make an arrest, according to that case, you would have to have people actively walking. He would have to actively impeding pedestrian traffic. So that's part of the decriminalization, that actually foreseeing that he could impede that traffic. Again, just goes down to the legislation, how they enable criminals to continue this behavior that's just a quality of life deterioration for New York City residents.
Yeah, again, so just to answer your question, Eric, you know how the undercovers are going to get on the subway? They're just going to go to the Bronx or Brooklyn and get on all the subway stations that aren't going to have this technology, and they're going to get on that way with their guns, the same way all the criminals are. I mean, that's how the undercovers are going to get on, the same way that people with illegal firearms are going to get on. They're just going to avoid the major hubs where these scanners are. I want to get into this a little bit because you touched on it. So John Shell and Kaz Daughtry have been going on this media tour. They tried to be me and Eric for a while on social media, and then they got the smackdown by New York City Council because they realized that they were acting completely unprofessionally and not acting as leaders of a storied institution. They were trying to be myself, Eric Dim, which is absolutely ridiculous. So they got the smackdown. They stopped doing that. But now they've been going on these softball media tours. They consistently go on the same media. So does Eric Adams. It's Dan Mamarino and Pix 11. John Shell has some type of relationship with the maniac Morning Joe, who they had to take off the air after Trump was shot because they had to pull him down because they didn't want him celebrating because he has such a bad case of Trump derangement syndrome. So John Shell loves to go on there with Al Sharpton, and they play friends. I'm waiting for the John and Al show to come out. But they go on these smaller podcasts too, and then they even talk about one day maybe they'll even get their own. So John Shell tweets this. He writes, "I really enjoyed this podcast with NYPD Daughtry. Thank you, Alec Wands, Ready Rebound, for a fun conversation about policing and life with some laughs in between. Alec is a young entrepreneur whose podcast is the Chief Exchange. Looking forward to more of his shows and other podcast requests that Kaz and I are going to participate in. We will support most podcast invites as a platform for discussing our great cops and city. Actually, stay tuned. One day we might be starting our own podcast or radio show." So myself and Eric are looking forward to them actually starting their own show. I mean, I think that would be an unyielding source of content. We'd have to do a show just solely based on debunking the numerous amount of lies that'll come out every time they post a show, whether it be daily, weekly, or monthly, however that show is. So, but you see right then and there, he's trying to take a cheap shot at us. So the podcast that the entirety of the NYPD listens to, which is this one, New York's Finest Retired Unfiltered podcast, the podcast that the entire New York media goes to when they have questions around policing, this one, the Finest Unfiltered, the podcast that all the politicians go to when they want to button up to the police. This one, we have the two people who supposedly run the New York City Police Department completely avoiding it. So I retweeted that and I said to him, maybe one day, and you and NYPD Daughtry will muster the courage to come on this podcast that the men and women of not only NYPD dues, but most of New York City and far beyond listen to. Your favorite podcast, New York's Finest Retired and Unfiltered podcast, the Finest Unfiltered. And I CC'd Eric Dim on this because, I'm sick of the nonsense around this podcast. I'm sick of the constant badgering. We have police officers, numerous police officers who follow our podcast, who follow our social media, who actually don't follow it because they're afraid of these two. We have officers sharing our stuff. They record it or they take photos of it and they share it amongst each other in group chats because they're not allowed to follow us on social media or follow our podcast because of these two. But they avoid this podcast because they're the cowards of New York City. You know who else is a coward? Pat Hendry. Pat, if you'll listen to this, you're a coward too. We wrote you a nice letter. We invited you to come on, and you're another one avoiding this podcast. This show is the #1 show when it's concerning the NYPD, politics, policing, and crime in New York City. And it's not even debatable, and the numbers show prove that as well. Sid Rosenberg has nothing on this show. Curtis Sliwa has nothing on this show. No one in New York has anything on this show when it comes to policing in New York City.
It's pretty funny that he was smart enough to put most podcasts. And just so, this also goes to the character and the lack of leadership on John Shell and Kaz Daughtry. I say it all the time. You should be stoic and professional, and you should mostly detach yourself from your position and actually take a professional stance. And opposition meets opportunity. Clearly, they don't come on this podcast because they don't like this podcast. They're in opposition to this podcast. And the reason why they don't like this podcast, I don't know if they like us or dislike us personally. I could care less. But the reason why they don't come on this podcast is because they can't gaslight us. They can't bamboozle John and myself when it comes to policing, because we do have expertise, right? We always say that's part of our slogan. We are the experts. And it's not something to be conceited by. It's we are the experts. Anyone that spends close to 20 years in policing, I would hope that you are an expert in your field, in any field. I'm not saying that John Shell and Kaz Daughtry aren't experts in their field, but what they do lack is leadership and the ability to have opposition meet opportunity and to be criticized. And it's funny what you said before, John, that they realized that what they were putting on social media wasn't professional. They never realized it because they continue to have the same egotistical, arrogant attitude they have towards the public. The only reason they're not doing it on social media is because they were spanked and smacked around by New York City Council. And I'm sure Mayor Eric Adams, we know he says one thing and does another. And he's telling the public that he supports his tough guy attitude on social media, John Shell. But behind closed doors, we could assume that he told him to cut it out because John Shell said he won't stop, and he stopped. So you're not a man of your word. You said you were going to. You said you wouldn't stop, and you did. So don't say things that you can't back up. And again, the reason that they're not coming on this podcast, and John and Kaz, you know what I'm talking about, is because you're scared of real questions, having real conversations. And you watch this podcast. You watch every episode. You don't have to lie. You know that we're professional with our opposition. We're professional with everyone. I believe you respect everyone. That doesn't mean you have to respect them, but you do show them respect. And if you're unsure how you would be treated if you come on this podcast, we did have Cop Watch on here, who was my biggest adversary and my arch nemesis when it came to policing. We had a great conversation here, and opposition meets opportunity. The question is, can you two handle it? You said you enjoy going on podcasts. You enjoy talking about police work. But yet you avoid this podcast that is the pinnacle podcast for policing. We are the pioneers of police media in New York City, in New York State, and actually throughout the country right now. We've built a network, and we are known for giving extremely accurate police perspective. And we are known for being stoic and professional with our opposition. And yet you two did not take the opportunity. I would love to have a picture of Pat Hendry also, because Pat Hendry, you, if anyone, should come on this podcast because we support the rank and file. So you should come on this podcast if you support the rank and file too.
I'll just put 3 patches of hair, one here, one here, one here. It'll be like Pat Henry. Let's listen to a little excerpt. This was a little controversial. I posted this yesterday. Let's listen to a little exchange that happens here on the Chief Exchange podcast. Here we go. And I'd love to get the audience thoughts on this. Here we go.
Online. I listen, when I was on the arrest teams, I used to put the onlines in myself. That was my favorite thing to do because I was real fast and everything was committed to muscle memory with me. But I actually fingerprinted one guy about a couple weeks ago, and it was like breaking news. Kaz is out there fingerprinting perps. I just wanted to see if I could still do it. And and it actually changed. Like the print machine live scan actually was like, it's more like revolutionized now. It was a little different than before when I was fingerprinting prisoners. But that's the thing right there, John. Like, I guarantee if I put you in a fingerprint, tell you to fingerprint this guy, you wouldn't even know what to do.
No, I would tell you to beat it. I would tell you to beat it. I'm not doing it.
But you know what? And the guy's prints were like, his hands were dry, and I had to go back to the old technique. Go give me some Windex, spray it on the guy's hand, and you know what? Boom, voila, guy fingerprints came back. But Kaz got the fingerprints down. But in order, Alex.
So what do you think about that, Eric?
What is this? What is this? My big fat Greek wedding, and they bring Windex to everything. You know what's funny about this? It's hilarious, right? Because he said, listen to what he said, right? He said, it's been a long time. It's like revolutionary. What do you mean it's been a long time? You were a detective 2 weeks ago. I was a detective about a year ago. Supposedly, as a detective, I know a lot of detectives. I have a lot of buddies that are detectives. They make arrests. And I don't think, I got to speak to them, but I don't think it's been that revolutionary in the past year. So the question is, when was the last time you were making arrests when you're driving around Chief Madry? And when you were making arrests, did you actually print them, or did Chief Madry have somebody do it for you? Because we can make the assumptions based on that statement alone. And again, these two are just, honestly, they're clowns. These two, they enjoy this podcast because you can bamboozle this. No disrespect to this person who has this podcast, the Chief Exchange, but they don't know police work like we do. This is absolutely ridiculous. That's why they don't come on this podcast, because we would say, whoa, wait a minute, Kaz. And it's not being disrespectful, but it's being honest. You were a detective a year ago. How revolutionary could it be? In the past year, how much really changed? From what I hear, not much has changed. I think it's still the same live scan that it was before. So it just reflects on what was going on in his career. Honestly, who was actually printing his perps for him? And wait a minute. He's a civilian right now. Why is he printing any perps? Why is he even involved in this? It's just, again, an overstep and overreaching of this rank, and just a complete abuse of authority.
Dude, this clip, I'm not even kidding. We could talk about it for an hour. One, if the technology did change in 1 year that he's been gone, it hasn't even been a year. Oh, yeah, maybe it's been a year. It's been a year. He was assistant commissioner. If the technology changed in 1 year since he's been a detective, he would have been the person responsible for changing it. So he's not aware of the technology that he's implementing. But yeah, I think you're 100% right. It just goes, he hasn't fingerprinted anybody in years, right? Everyone else was probably doing it. 2, spraying Windex on somebody's hands. The Windex is on the thing so you could spray the live scan machine and clear the fingerprints, get the body's natural oils off of it. I know a lot of the old timers are going to talk about Cornhuskers oil, but it was nowhere to be found. And I'm going to be honest, in 18 years, not one person ever told me to use Cornhuskers oil until I got out here on social media. I never even seen it. In the comments. Not one time. So 18 years, I never seen it. I don't think you did it. But what I used to do, and I was very good, and I could print somebody like this. I printed hundreds of people. And what I used to do is say, just rub your head, go like this. And then boom, you have oil over your hand. Boom, nice and easy. Nice, easy. It's your body's natural oil. And then I would clean the live scan machine again, which is actually how you're instructed to do it. So we had a huge debate back and forth. Windex. I think Windex dries your hands. You're out of your mind. I don't think it's worth. 2, you're spraying something on someone's hand that I don't think anybody. More than likely, if they want to, they can file a complaint against you. It would be abuse of authority, and I think it would be substantiated. It's like, wait, you sprayed Windex on a dude's hands? The other thing, you're right. He's a civilian. What the hell is he doing printing people? Like, the kid is he doesn't know how to delegate. He doesn't know how to delegate because he doesn't have the supervisory experience. I was a sergeant. As a sergeant, did I help guys fingerprints? Sometimes if they were stuck, or I saw them spraying Windex on people's hands, or I saw them having a serious problem, I would go in and I would teach them my trick. Have them touch their hair, have them touch their head, go in, make sure them, and then I would show them how to do the roll, right? Because there's a little technique to it. But I could do it right now. I'm positive I could do it right now. I could get right in my position and fingerprint someone in 3 seconds. But it really, there's so much there that it's crazy in that little clip. That one, Eric, what do you think about him spraying Windex, and what do you think if the guy did file a complaint against the New York City Police Department? Do you think that CCRB would find him guilty of abuse of authority?
Well, they would find him guilty, but Chief Maggi would bail him out, just as he bailed himself with Administrative Judge Maldonado with the New York City Police Department. It would be thrown out. Of course, they would say it's not in their purview, and but it's absolutely ridiculous. Of course, it's so silly that you're gonna. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, wait a minute, Windex. You spray their hands at Windex, it's probably gonna dry it up. The whole thing is ridiculous. I think it's funny too. I have a couple of retired guys. They were putting pictures of Cornhusker piles on Twitter. I thought it was hilarious. I never knew about the Cornhuskers thing. I think it's. I knew the same thing as you with the fingers in the hair, the oil, but I think it's hilarious. This whole idea with Windex again, it just solidifies. Like Kaz Daughtry doesn't want to come to this podcast because we'd be like, wait a minute, hold on, you're spraying Windex. These guys' hands isn't dry. You can bamboozle other people, but they can't bamboozle us. And if you're going to have your own podcast, right? Because John Shell loves to talk about misinformation. You got to be very careful that the information that you put out there is accurate and true, and at least true to your anecdotal experience. So before you have that podcast, but I tell you what, and John, I know you feel the same way. If you two come out with a show, John and I would be glad to come on your show, and we will handle any conversation with you. Opposition meets opportunity. We don't fear at any time. You don't have to tell us what the questions are. We'll come on there and we'll just shoot right from the hip because we're honest and we'll tell the truth from our experience. And we can back it up. We show that, right? We faced opposition from the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association. We laid the smackdown on that one. Your dream team tried to smear us on social media. We haven't heard a peep from them. You guys tried to smear us on social media. Of course, you're afraid to say our names, but do me a favor, please. When you call us out, can you just say John and Eric? No problem. Just call us out directly. We can have this conversation instead of subliminal messages. But it's a shame that they try to bamboozle the public. You know, they're just gaslighting. It's so interesting when you actually listen to someone's conversation and you can dissect it and actually see what's going on here. I just think it's crazy that he's saying it's been years. What were you doing all those years besides driving Chief Maggi and affording the fruits of nepotism? What else were you doing?
Driving him to get some booty on duty is what he was actually doing, and then covering up and then botching calls that he had no business, control calls that he had no business to doing, which caused rapists to walk free on New York City streets. He did a lot of things besides being a New York City police officer. That's what he absolutely did. But yeah, I mean, for John Shell, obviously, he was a boss a long time. I don't expect him to know the live scan machine or be good at the up-to-date technology. He was a boss. Kaz Daughtry is pretending that he's at the level of John Shell, where he's a 30-year veteran who was a boss for a long time, when it's really not the case. He's a rookie driver he's a rookie sergeant's operator who really isn't too well versed in anything in the New York City Police Department because he never really went through the same path the rest of us. Yes, was he a cop? Yes. Did he make arrests? Yes. But he did it at his own leisure when he wanted to. He didn't do details the way you did. He was in the THV while you were standing out there. Even the arrest, you could clearly see somebody was doing the process for him. He was just putting his name down. So I mean that was a huge telltale on that. Let's get into this. Let's get into what happened at Randall's Island.
Yeah, you know what? Let me go. I'm pulling up this article for a second because I saw this article and I said, "Wow, when have you ever heard of a shooting at Randall's Island?" First of all, so this is I'm just going to read Channel 4 News. Woman dead, 2 hurt in Randall's Island shooting. Authorities are investigating a triple shooting on Randall's Island that left a woman dead overnight, police said Monday. According to investigators, the woman who died was shot in the face near the city-run migrant shelter. She was 44. Also wounded, a 31-year-old woman who was shot in the lower back and a 32-year-old man who was shot in the throat. Both men are expected to survive. I mean, when have you ever heard of a shooting on Randall's Island? I don't even think Randall's is. I to my knowledge, I don't think Randall's Island was ever occupied by any living residents. There's a park there. The fire department has their academy there. The police department does their rallies and assemblies when it comes to mobile responses. But now you have a migrant shelter there, and I gotta be honest. I'm surprised that there's any footage on this right now, because this really goes into, again, the military age males, the unvetted migrants that we have, this illegal alien crisis that's going on in New York City that is just plaguing the city with crime. This is out of control. What are your thoughts on Randall's Island? This is crazy.
This is a politically created crisis. This shooting, along with the other shooting, along with the robbery patterns stemming from mopeds, along with all the crimes surrounded by migrant shelters, around with all the rapes of children that have happened around these migrant shelters, all of the crime that has been brought in to New York City by people who cross the border illegally, I lay solely at the feet of New York City Mayor. Again, the official position of New York City is the border should remain open. That's Eric Adams' words, not mine. Look at my social media. I clearly put the video. I must have posted about 10 times. So for people to understand this, he comes out a few days ago and endorses the borders are Vice President Kamala Harris, who again I lay the blame when it comes to nationally letting people cross our border illegally. I lay it at Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So he comes out and endorses her. He says Kamala Harris is the voice that we need at this time. So clearly, the problem in New York City, the problem nationally, is the policies of the Democratic Party and Democratic candidates. So when I look at this, and everyone starts to look to Eric Adams for answers, when they look to his appointed management in all of our agencies for answers, I'm like, you're looking to the people that created this problem to solve it for you. What you need to be doing is to find viable candidates to run against them and to start advocating out there in public, like myself and Eric do, to remove these people. Get some people with actual common sense in there. And again, as of today, ICE will not be notified about these arrests. These people are now here permanently. There are problems now. The shooter who murdered 3 people is our problem. Whoever else was involved in the murder is our problem. It falls on the feet of New York City taxpayers. And this is what the Eric Adams administration has done to New York City. I posted something a while back on the Rita Cosby show when she had Rudy Giuliani on, and it was right after the debate where Eric Adams had stated that he was going to continue the sanctuary city policy in New York City and how he would never cooperate with ICE because he didn't want the police to harm. I believe there was a different word at the time, undocumented, before they started calling them migrants, undocumented. And when you watch that, and you listen to that, Rudy Giuliani predicts exactly what's going to happen. Is it because Rudy Giuliani's a mystic? No. It's because you have to be a moron to not understand that if you're going to give everybody everything and open the borders and say, hey, we're going to give you everything to come here, that people aren't going to come and you're going to have numerous problems. So Eric Adams, this is on you. Whoever voted for him, it's on you even more.
You know, it's funny. I think the Democrats, they induced the Munchausen syndrome to the public. And we all know what the Munchausen syndrome is, right? It's when you induce illness and then you treat the symptoms. And that's exactly what's going on in New York City, right? It's almost like, I just want people to understand, right? When people cross the border because of Kamala Harris's policies, Mayor Eric Adams is inviting them in. So you can't say, a lot of people excuse Mayor Eric Adams and say, well, it's not his fault, right? Because of the open borders. But if you had a neighborhood, right? If you had a neighborhood that had a security gate and you just left that gate wide open and everybody came into the neighborhood unauthorized and everyone's house was representative of a state, and your house was New York City, and you opened the door, you said, come on in, I got food, I got credit cards for you. Which house you going to? And that's what's going on. That's the assimilation I could give for what's going on in New York City. The border is wide open, but Eric Adams like, come on in, I got food, I got credit cards, I'll get you a job, come on in. Where are you going? New York City. New York State is the touchdown state when it comes to illegal aliens. But again, I think the Democrats are administering the Munchausen syndrome because they cause the illnesses and then they want to treat the symptoms. I just saw recently, it's in the Bay Area, Oakland area in California. I mean, crime is out of control. I've seen pictures. It looks like a third world country. It's insane. But Gavin Newsom, who has some of the most woke progressive politics in the entire country, has now authorized, and he's enabling law enforcement officers in the Oakland area to and advocate to utilize more vehicle pursuits to apprehend the perpetrators. John Shell, I just want to let you know that if you take a look at that could be you also. So Gavin Newsom is administering the illness, causing the crime problems, but let's treat the symptoms now. Let's have the police officers get involved in these fleeing pursuits to stop the crimes. And that's what's going on in the entire country. The Munchausen syndrome for the Democrats. They administer the illness and then they try to treat the symptoms. It's laughable. But again, I just think it's insane. People have to wait. You know, and this is the arm of the Democratic Party, and this is their mission. You know, they cause the illness and they treat the symptoms.
Let's stop cops from pulling people over because it's racist. Because car stops, supposedly, according to Democrats, they harm black and brown people disproportionately, right? Car stops do that. At the same time, let's increase the number of car chases. This is a Democratic plan, right? These people are absolutely insane. Gavin Newsom is probably a little smarter than Eric Adams. Not much. They're cut from the same cloth. I mean, you know, they're interchangeable. They're interchangeable people. 100% low integrity individuals have zero clue when it comes to public safety. Zero clue. I give Gavin Newsom a pass, though, because Gavin Newsom wasn't a New York City cop. He didn't grow up poor like Eric Adams. So Eric Adams, in my opinion, is much worse person than Gavin Newsom. I don't know that he knows better, but he should know better. Look at this. Elon Musk shared an AI video, like a satirical video about Kamala Harris. Gavin Newsom, his response is, manipulating a voice in an ad like this one should be illegal. I'll be signing a bill in a matter of weeks to make sure it is. So now the Democrats are going after satire. And the reason they are, because this is what I tweet, I said the Democrats have become such a joke that they must make satire a crime. And that's exactly what's going on. They're such a joke that they have to come after memes, satire, and everything else because their literal platform is satirical. Don't do car stops, but car chases are good. Make it make sense, please. Please, Eric, make something make sense. I can't.
That's why I think John Shell and Kaz Daughtry are gonna try to get a job with the Democratic Party because, I mean, they're doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing. There's no difference, and I don't even think they realize it. I think they're running for the Democratic Party. I'm sure post in retirement, that's going to be their path.
The wisecracker comment. He says the pendulum has swung. Whites are constantly targeted by the NYPD as they don't even want to get flack for arresting blacks. Now, see, I think a little differently. I agree with you to the point that the NYPD now goes after easy targets. I believe that they'll go after easy. Grandma will get a ticket for not clicking her seatbelt as she's leaving the store. Grandma could be white or black, but grandma's driving a nice car in a nice neighborhood. She's getting a car. Now, grandma's a complete wacko, smoking pot out the window, driving, blasting her radio, screaming out the window. Grandma's getting a pass. I don't care what color she is. And I think that's what we've done is go after good people. It's not really a white or blacker thing. It's really a law-abiding criminal thing. We give criminals a pass. Law-abiding normal people, we're going to move to do enforcement on. They're less likely to file complaints on you. They're more likely to just pay the summons and move on. And they're not going to be combative with you on the car stop as well. Or a stop and encounter on the street, whether it be for some low-level fare evasion or anything else. And the fact that Eric brought up earlier when we were talking about the medical detectors and the gun detection, when Mike Kemper testifies in front of New York City Council and he says that almost 90% of the people who are stopped for fare evasion aren't frisked. I mean, that's proof right there. You didn't feel a need to. You're stopping the wrong people and you're summoning the wrong people then, right? Because you should, if you're stopping someone for fare evasion, you should be thinking that they're a threat and a danger to New York City subways and to New York City commuters and to New York City and to police officers. But if you're not frisking them or putting your hands on them, you don't feel a threat at that point, right? You didn't do anything wrong. So why is that? It's because it's probably some lady for work that walked through an open door that somebody held open for her. And the maniac that opened the door, you let walk. And that's the same thing that's going to happen with these scanners.
Absolutely. I agree. I don't think this is a race issue. I think it's a political issue, right? If you're on the conservative side of things, that you're actually a target for police right now. You're a target for law enforcement because you're not combative towards police. You're not going to make complaints. Mostly, we have obliging citizens. They're supportive of police. They're respectful of police. So they're not going to be obtuse or a curb, an obstacle for the police. But if you're on the liberal side of things, the Democratic side of things, you have an anti-police sentiment. You're going to be argumentative, and you're going to make complaints, and you could cause an uproar, or maybe you have potential connection with BLM network, something, or pro-Palestinian riots, something that could have a connection to an angry mob. That those people are not targeted by the police. Those people are not summoned and not being arrested. The overwhelming majority of those people, and we see it, right? What we have to have a comparison. We have to have a standard, right? And we've seen this. We've seen the comparison. We've seen the standard. We saw how the police department addressed an all-out riot at Union Square of young youths that are mostly on the Democratic side of things in Manhattan, in comparison to conservatives in Staten Island protesting illegal aliens, military-age males entering New York City. So we see the dichotomy right there. And that's where I think is online what's going on. I think the police officers are scared and timid to actually address the actual criminals. I don't think it's a black and white thing either. I think if they address the criminals, that they're going to face backlash from the Civilian Complaint Review Board, potentially New York City Council, in comparison to when you actually summons and arrest an obliging citizen. That's not going to be an obstacle for you. And that's what's going on. It's political theater.
And then Boots Malaka 1, he also comments. He says, the hardworking people are always behind, yanked over and given paper. The cops in California are known for doing this, cutting a break to a person of color. Again, I'm going to say it's not that, because if I'm Italian. We felt the heavy hand of broken windows in Italian neighborhoods across New York City. And I could easily be wearing a tank top right now with my gold chain out, yelling and screaming and cursing they'll avoid it, right? I could be blowing pot out my window in my car, blasting my radio, yelling, cursing, be confrontational with everyone I see on the street. And I believe I'll be avoided that way. But the way I am, if I wear a suit and I'm driving my car with my family in the car, I have a problem, right? I'm wearing glasses. I look totally different in the perception. I really think it's a good thing. I think most of what we see, the inequities in law enforcement, I believe it comes from a socioeconomic stance. Even on the premises of bail reform, where we said, that poor black and brown people are kept in jail for minor crimes when white people aren't. And I don't think so, because I was a poor white man, and if I got stuck in jail and couldn't pay the bill, nobody was coming to say, "Oh, well, he's white, let's just let him out." I always think it's a socioeconomic thing, and that's just my thought on when you're going after easy targets, especially in New York, because again, I don't know who's white. Is it immigrant Italian guy? Is the immigrant Polish guy? Is it the Jewish guy? Who's actually the evil white man in New York City? Who's the evil white man in California? I really don't know. But I mean, I think it's a good conversation. It's something we need to look at. And I think when we look at this gun detection technology, again, I think we could point the same thing. This is going to harm good people more than it is criminals.
Should we expect to hear from the Civilian Complaint Review Board, the New York City Council, that the gun detection scanners are disproportionately hurting black and brown people? I mean, could we find out these scanners could be racist themselves? I have no idea. But again, it just shows how ridiculous this whole thing is. I agree. This whole thing is political theater. And I think the reason why we feel that there is some type of racial component to it is because there is a correlation with race when it comes to capitalism versus racism. And I took this course in college. It was called Urban American Blacks, and you understand about the generation of black families and whether they were set back in wealth because of capitalism or racism. So there's a connection to race and economic status, and I think that's why the cops feel that. But really what it comes down to is criminology, and I agree with you. I think that if you present yourself in a tank top and you just act like a totally emotionally disturbed person, that you would actually meet less opposition with the police. They would not want to encounter you at this point right now with the legislation and the administration, the leadership that we have, because you're an obstacle for the police. You could lead to a complaint. The media will want your story. They'll protect you. In comparison, if you're in a suit and you're stoic and you're professional, you're an easy mark for the police at this point. The administration. I'm not blaming the rank and file. I'm blaming the police officers for the actions that they're taking because of the leadership that is directing them in that manner. It's unfortunate, but that's where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what's going on. I mean, that's you couldn't nail it better. Like the guy that goes to work every day, pays his taxes, really is a danger to nobody. He's at more of a threat of enforcement. And Boots, I hope I'm saying your name right, Busta Malaka, one. He says, we had a judge set bail on a school teacher for a DWI, right? So, I mean, school teacher, more than likely, this is the worst day of his life, right? He had a DWI, made a mistake. Is it a horrible mistake? Is he lucky that someone didn't die? Absolutely. But he made a mistake. We're human. Humans make mistakes. There are no perfect people. He has a DWI, and he gets bail set on. I call it a repeat felon burglar. He had a mask and a meat cleaver disguised gun. Judge RORs, he was black. She was a white lib judge. So, I mean, is it a race thing? I'm going to say no, because I'm going to say reverse it. Reverse the colors or just make them both white or both black. I think you're getting the same outcomes there. I really do. I think you're going to get the same outcomes. It really, I'm telling you, it's law-abiding versus criminal. We're a criminal first society. You're a law-abiding individual. You're going to have a problem. There was another police-involved shooting of a mentally ill person in Fort Lee, New Jersey. That is the hometown of Eric Adams. That is where he resides. So Eric Adams, the first New Jersey resident to become Brooklyn Borough president, the first New Jersey resident to become a New York State senator, and the first New Jersey resident to become the mayor of New York City. We had that. We have very limited details other than what the political narrative is being put on in the media. We will 100%, when the body cameras released, break that down. We just spoke about the Sonia Massey police-involved shooting. We thought that was an absolute horrible shooting. We think that cop, who is no longer a cop, never deserved to be a cop and shouldn't, and that he was actually a product of diversity, equity, inclusion, although he was a white man, because the take that we have is diversity, equity, inclusion lowers standards across the board. It doesn't just lower standards based on your gender. It doesn't just lower standards based on your skin color. It lowers standards in hiring, in training, and the standards that need to be upkept. And if you guys watch that video, that is a wild video. A million things done wrong. So yeah, we're going to definitely do that. We are going to be moving a lot of these videos over to Rumble so that we aren't censored ourselves, so we could play the whole video and you could see everything. So we'll let you guys know, and we'll keep you informed about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that everyone should watch the Sonia Massey case shooting. I think they should watch the body camera several times. You need to watch that body camera over and over. And as you watch it over and over, you'll start to see different things really ferment and emerge in that case. I think that was a completely egregious. It was absolutely ridiculous. And again, I've said this before on prior podcasts. If you're a law enforcement out there in this country or anywhere in this world, that case, that police officer, Sean Grayson, is not reflective of you, and you are not reflective of him. He does not reflect the law enforcement community. It was absolutely ridiculous. It was someone who should not be a cop. I mean, he was removed from the Army for serious misconduct. And listen, no disrespect to fellow veterans. I was a veteran myself, but to be removed from the Army for serious misconduct, you got to be a real screw up. You got to, I mean, you get a lot of leniency, a lot of chances, because it's understood that when you enter the military, you're young and stupid, and you make mistakes. And again, just clearly this was egregious. And I think it's important to watch this also, and you check out our podcast and our perspective on that shooting, because we want people to understand we do not have this ideology of back the blue, things like that you hear. We give fair assessments. We support the rank and file. We support the good law enforcement out there, which is the overwhelming majority. But I say this all the time. In order to protect the profession, we have to give an honest assessment. So when we see something that just is not appropriate and does not fit and is conducive with good law enforcement activities, we will call it out and we will address it properly. And everyone should. That's how we keep this strong and keep the profession honest and keep it with integrity, by actually giving a proper assessment, even when there's something that's not agreeable with law enforcement and something that is in complete opposition with good law enforcement duties.
100%. Listen, before we get off, I just want to bring this. Last night, there was a woman who's in critical condition after she was stabbed multiple times at a Queens subway station. I'm going to say right now that the gun detector or weapon detector AI technology that the drone commissioner put into place across New York City doesn't prevent this, right? This is an outer borough train station, so there's not going to be anything there. We don't know the point of exit and the point of entry. And even let's say these detectors were at every train station, you need them to be manned by police officers. So if they're not, so you logistically, it's impossible to man all the train stations. So that's one. But let's say they did. Even if they did, there's still going to be people that go get through the cracks. So, Eric, what do you think? Does the gun detector or the metal detector prevent things like this from happening in the outer boroughs or even in the major hubs?
Absolutely not. That's why I said this before. Even with the gun scanner this detection technology, if you have the gun detection technology in every single transit system, in every entrance or exit, it does not deter things like this. Again, the obliging citizens, the ones that are going to work, they're the ones that are going to be affected by this gun detection system. They're the ones that are going through the scanners. They're the ones that potentially their health is at adverse risk, in opposition to these perpetrators, the cretins of society in New York City. They're not going to utilize the transit system. They're utilizing the transit system now because they don't have to pay for it. I mean, according to Michael Kepper himself, he testified to New York City Council that 97% are not being frisked and searched. And if they are summoned, that they're getting a summons that is civil in nature. So if you're a potential perpetrator in New York City, if you were utilizing the transit system to perpetuate your crimes, you weren't paying for the system anyway. You weren't held accountable for it because you're getting a civil summons. You're not getting a summons that you actually have to be subpoenaed or report to court, potentially under a bench warrant or an arrest warrant. So it's not something that you have to worry about. So they're not going to utilize the transit system. If they're utilizing for criminology, they're not going to use it now. So this doesn't curb it at all. They'll be in and around the areas. It's exactly what I've been saying a long time. Eric Adams' plan with omnipresence does not curb crime. It just displaces it. And so does this gun detection system. It doesn't curb crime. It just displaces it. Because if you're in possession of a legal firearm, you won't utilize this particular system. You'll be in and around the areas. And again, I said there's other forms of of public transportation and other modes of transportation in New York City. It's the largest metropolis in the world for transit. So it's absolutely ridiculous, except for Tokyo. But it's one of the largest transit systems in the world with buses, cars, bikes. There's other modes of transportation. This is absolutely ridiculous.
All right. This is like, again, this is not a meme. This is legit. Like, this is how much of a joke the Democratic Party has become. This is legit. White dudes for Harris. Mark Hamill, those you might know him from Star Wars, who played Luke Skywalker, turned absolute beta male, posted this on his Twitter account, or X, whatever you want to call it now, posted this to his X account. I'm getting one of these hats, man. Not because I support any of this, but like, this is a complete joke in history. We are just devolving as a species. What is white dudes for Harris? What? So white dudes for Indian women? Like what? Like what is this? It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I can't. Naked Coffee asks, as a retired MOS, valid permit, can I carry on the subways in New York City? So if you have an HR 218, obviously you're able to carry in all 50 states, right? Retired members of service, as long as you keep that up, that's a yearly requal, yearly renewal of your license. You're able to carry in all 50 states, and you are exempt from the sensitive location unconstitutional law that New York put in place. So if you have that, you're good, right? I just highly recommend that you make sure that you're concealed carrying, because there have been issues in New York City with dumb rookie cops and dumb rookie supervisors and people that don't really understand what's a real crime and what's not. It can't differentiate good people and bad people, where retired MOS's shirts have lifted up. They lifted up and they actually collared them for illegal, I forget what statute they hit them for, but it actually went through and the judge actually found them guilty of illegal possession of a firearm, because we have, as retired MOS, we have concealed carry. And what the judge said is, yeah, you're required to conceal it. So yes, we can. However, you will be identified if you walk through these scanners. We're seeing that more and more in malls now. My brother-in-law just told me a story. He was in the Roosevelt Field Mall, and he's walking with his gun. The Staten Island Mall I was in the other day, it actually has a sign, no firearms. So it actually has no firearms in the Staten Island Mall. So when my brother-in-law was in the Roosevelt Field Mall, and in the Roosevelt Field Mall, he's walking, and he just sees a dude following him with the dog, like one of the security. And he's like, oh, man, what the fuck's going on? And then next thing he knows, he sees the guy who's got a supervisor. He's with my nieces. And he approaches them. He says, everything all right? They were like, yeah, everything's good. And my brother-in-law looks like a cop. You're not mistaking him for anything else. So he had to actually, they're like, oh, you retired from the job? He's like, yeah. He had to show them his license and his ID card. And it wasn't an issue, but it could be an issue. It could be an issue because, they could remove you, ask you to leave the property. If they call 911, it could even be a further issue. You get the wrong cops or the wrong supervisor to show up. So my contention is, in New York City, for retired MOS, for concealed carry holders, you really need to know the law to a T and understand it better than the police officers and the judges do. And even then, you still might have more of an issue than that dude who we just played a little bit earlier, who was sleeping on the stairs of the New York City subway with a illegal firearm in his waist. Eric, you muted, bro.
I think I just muted. Yeah. So to our comment here, you're absolutely going to have more of an issue than a legal perpetrator, a person of interest in New York City right now. Why? Because of the standards that we've been talking about. We have police officers that are getting indicted. We have police officers getting convicted of doing their job while they're on duty, in opposition to actual criminals. Criminals are not being convicted, but we see former Sergeant Stephen Lee convicted. Juan Perez, former police officer, convicted of an assault case, handling an emotionally disturbed person while he was on duty, summoned to a 911 call. So again, you're always going to have that label attached to you. If you're a concealed carry, absolutely, you have to know the law. And even then, when you know the law, going to specific locations could put you in a precarious position. I would definitely be wary of it. Honestly, I wouldn't even go to these establishments, these private establishments that are anti-firearm. I mean, it just completely goes against the Second Amendment. Again, and does not support law enforcement. Any private business that does not want you to go in their firearm, you should question it. And I wouldn't even patronize these businesses for that reason. It's absolutely ridiculous. I think that we need to be aware of it. Again, it completely goes against the Second Amendment. But I will say this, John, and I've said this for a long time. I support the Second Amendment. Huge advocate for firearms, but I am actually in opposition of open carry. I do not support open carry. I think that your firearm should be concealed, and concealed where nobody notices it. I used to see a lot of rookie cops, and they would conceal their firearm, but they would also carry it in a way that people knew they had a gun. And I don't think you should do that. I think that is a sense of presence, and that is a form of violence. You're letting people know I'm armed and I'm ready. It should be concealed, and it should be there if you need it. And if you don't need it, well, you're glad that you have it. So this is definitely a stance I believe in. Concealed carry, but make sure it's actually concealed.
I think you'd get a lot of pushback on that. If we had, because we got a lot of people from New York and California. You're not gonna, because I agree with Kyle Seraphin when he told me you didn't live in America, you lived in New York. I never really thought into it much. Second Amendment doesn't, but just looking at the law itself, I don't think Second Amendment really says concealed versus open. So I'm going to say, right, those laws actually are made up. And if you really fought those out in a court of law, I think that open carry would win out. I do. It's something that actually Florida is looking to do. Ron DeSantis, he does some questionable things, DeSantis, but I agree with you. I wouldn't patronize any place that shows those signs. I was in Charleston, South Carolina, not too long ago, and basically everywhere I went there, it had a sign on the window. Can't carry, no concealed carry allowed. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, where the hell could I go eat? We're actually looking, and I'm like, no, not this one. And I'm not telling my wife why, right? I'm not telling my kids why we can't go in there. And these restaurants look beautiful and all these other things. And I'm just like, hey, not this one. Let's look. I'm not in the mood for this. I'm not in the mood for that. And it was really, I'm looking at, like, the windows were blaringly saying no conceal. And I'm like, the whole time, I'm like, in my head, we're walking and I'm just getting annoyed. It's hot as hell in South Carolina this time of year. And I'm like, why am I restricted from going to eat? Like, what am I going to do? I have this solely to protect myself, my family, and others. That's it. There's no, the last thing I'm going to do is, the last thing I want to do is ever utilize this thing. It's the last damn thing I ever want to do. And I think that applies to most of us. I don't drink. I could understand that I understand the laws that, like, you shouldn't be allowed to drink and carry a firearm. I agree with that. I don't want people getting beer muscles or things of that nature. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't support any businesses that have that take that stance. And honestly, I think that was the last time I'm walking in the Staten Island Mall, because I was like, I'm like, this is ridiculous. Why are you stopping me? Why are you stopping me? What am I a danger to? Who am I a danger to?
I'm just curious what you actually think about it. I mean, because that's always been my stance, and I continue, to stand on that. That I support the Second Amendment. I support legal gun owners, not illegal gun owners, right? Who don't have horses. Legal gun owners. But I believe those firearms, if you're a legal gun owner, I think it should be concealed. I don't think you should have open carry. Now, if you're doing security, you're working as law enforcement, that's different. Or you're open carry, that's part of your uniform, that's part of your presence, right? Which is a form of presence that is actually violence, right? We need that presence to keep people safe. But I believe if you're a legal gun owner under the Second Amendment, that you should be concealed carry. What are your thoughts on that? I'm just curious.
I think that's an unconstitutional statute. I do. So I don't know that I agree with you or not. Like, I never really gave too much thought into it. I don't think that I don't think like read the Second Amendment. It doesn't say anything about concealed or open.
No. It doesn't. I'm just saying, like my. I agree. I'm just saying that how I feel about it. The way I just think that as well, like you said, because we talk about man's law and moral law, and I believe that you're right. The Second Amendment doesn't say, right, because according to the Second Amendment, to bear arms, it doesn't say whether it should be visible or not. But I'm just saying that from my perspective, from my experience doing police work all the years, I think that it should be concealed. I think that if you actually have it for the right purposes, it should be concealed. I think that open carry, I think is a bad presence. You're already kind of escalating situations when you enter a situation in your open carry. That's my position. But nothing to do with law. I'm just saying the way I feel about it.
Yeah, but I think that's a lot of because we grew up in New York too. Like to me, if I seen someone open carrying, I'd be like, oh my God, because I never really seen it other than with cops, right? So I mean, but I think, if you go into an armed society, I don't think it is. And me, myself, I personally wouldn't open carry even if it was legal, because I believe it puts you at a tactical disadvantage. I could agree with you that it could be taken as an aggressive stance, but it's honestly, it's kind of, it's one of those things for me. I never really thought about it. I have to really give it a lot more thought, but I think when we get down to the founding of this nation, I agree with the First Amendment. I agree with the Second Amendment. I agree with these laws. So I'd have to say that if I had to choose freedom over safety, I'm taking freedom and I'm going open carry away, boys, if that's what you want to do,
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of look at it. So I guess I could simulate this, right? So I believe you have a right to defend yourself, right? But do I walk into businesses or locations? Do I walk around flexing, posturing? Do I walk around, grinding my teeth, showing people that I'm always at the ready? No, I'm more passive in my stance, right? I train to protect myself and to be able to protect others, but I don't show that presence, right? It's more of a soft appearance and relaxed, right? I don't go and flexing my hands and keeping my fist up. And that's the way I look at the firearm, that you're kind of like, you're posturing, you're showing people like you're ready. And I'm just saying as a behavioral standpoint, I do support, but I do believe it should be concealed. The same thing, I don't think you should walk around and go, hey, I can beat people up. I lift 300 pounds, or I'm a martial artist. These are things that I think you should, that should remain kind of under your hat.
Yeah, but I'm going to push back on you because you have cauliflower ears. You have cauliflower ears. You're in shape, right?
Right.
When you walk in the room, although you are not an aggressive individual, for no reason, you're a controlled aggressive individual. That's a posture.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
And like it's same for me. I walk in wearing a Staten Island's extra medium shirt. It's a posture. It's an aggressive stance, whether you want it to be or not. So I don't know. I mean, listen, it's a good conversation. I'll tell you that.
That's why I love having these conversations. Because no, you definitely opened my mind and my eyes to that. I never thought about that. You're right, because you just it happened to me the other day. I was actually in the grocery store, and the kid's like, "Oh, you training?" I'm like, "Hey, how do you know?" He's like, "Oh, look at you. I see your ears." He's like, "I've been trying to get it." I was like, "No, you don't want it." Because he's like, "No, I want it." I'm like, "Oh, okay." But you're right, because people see that like, oh, "Okay, wait a minute, this guy trains. He can fight." So I definitely see what you're saying. That's a good point. I never thought of it that way. And hey, just like Kaz and John Shell, when you watch this, sometimes it's okay to say, "Hey, you know what? That's a good idea. That's a good point. I never thought of it." Doesn't make you any less.
All right, listen, I'm definitely pissed that Twitter pulled us down today, but we'll get that back up and we'll get it going. For all you guys out there on Facebook, Steve Engelhard, Senior, we still want to get you on, brother. A bunch of guys, bunch of the retired guys out on YouTube and Rumble. We appreciate you, all the comments, all the likes, all the support. We are going to be shortly. We're still going back and forth over that now, where we're going to do some type of subscription based the majority of our content will remain free, but there will be some other type of episodes. And at least once a week, there will be subscription that'll be behind a paywall. We'll keep it cheap and affordable. Our more concerned is what the content is more than what the price is. So we'll be putting that information out. Please follow us on X, like us, or on YouTube, or wherever you watch or listen. I see so many views, man, and I gotta say I thank everybody, but it never correlates to the follows. When I looked at the follows, and when I looked at who's following us versus who consistently watches us, it's literally 50%. There's a 50% drop off. We have returning viewers consistently that don't follow us or don't like us. Again, that has to do with Shell and Kaz not liking this podcast. But I really think it's time, and I'm going to step it up, and I'm going to start to advocate a lot more, and I know Eric is, that we're going to get them on this podcast. And if we don't, we're going to call them out on every piece of media that they do. And we're even going to call out the media that they do, because it's absolutely ridiculous that the number one podcast related to policing, crime, and politics in New York City, they don't come on. The one that all of their members listen to, they don't come on. It's blaringly obvious. And we're going to start letting them know how cowardly it is. And we're going to be unafraid to do that. Johnny, what's up, brother? We see you. Good morning. Thanks for the support as always. But yeah, if they don't come on here, follow us on X. Follow myself and Eric. Follow at the Finest Cast on X. Follow at the Finest Unfiltered on TikTok, on Instagram. Follow those accounts, because you're going to see some memes, and we're going to step it up and let everyone know exactly how cowardly they are. Eric, before we go, Nate, this is actually a good question. What do you think about firemen and paramedics not being able to conceal carry on duty, or home healthcare nurses, all because it's against company or department policy?
It's interesting that you say that, right? So I think that is incumbent on the business. I think that if you're working for a company and they don't want you to carry the firearm because of liability, things like that, I think I actually agree with that, because I think that the company has a right for their own liabilities. They have to have certain insurances for it. I think that I could see why they might have the stance for you not to carry the firearm. So I think it would be a case-by-case basis depending on the agency. But I don't disagree with it. I mean, if you're working for, I guess if you're an EMT, I could see why I could see it. Listen, I've worked in the South Bronx. I've worked all over New York City, and EMTs have tough jobs, especially sometimes they have to handle emotionally disturbed persons. But if they did have firearms concealed, then it might change the protocol. And the reason being, because right now EMTs do respond to emotionally disturbed persons after especially if it's someone that may be violent, they wait for the police to handle the job before the EMTs respond. And they usually respond after the police have gotten it settled. So it could change the protocol, but I think it is up to the agency. This is something different. You're not off duty, walking around shopping. I think if you're working for the agency, I think that you would have to go by the policy of the agency, and I can understand it. I'm not saying it's right. Could there be times where someone is having concealed carry? Yes, but at the same time, you're an EMT and you're dealing sometimes with these emotionally disturbed people that might, or someone that's having an epileptic seizure, and they may grab onto you. It could be a potential issue, and I think it could be a liability. Again, that's the way I see it at this point.
I mean, so I think that most of these companies go the way of the world, and they're completely woke organizations. I do think that when it relates to firemen, I think it would be more of a safety hazard for a fireman to conceal carry running into a fire. I wouldn't, if I was going to do that job, I wouldn't want a firearm on my hip at that moment in time as I'm running into a burning building. So I think as far as that is concerned, as far as home healthcare nurses, my wife's sister did a stint in that for a while. She actually had a retired law enforcement officer who would drive her around to these places because she was going into into really dangerous neighborhoods and dangerous places. I know a lot of companies stopped doing that as it got so expensive. I'm not against anybody concealed carrying. So, and I think people of good standing in society, especially home healthcare nurses and firefighters, should have concealed carry and firearms in their home and be allowed to carry. I believe they're upstanding citizens. As far as the companies, I think it's very tyrannical. I think it's nonsense. I think that if they don't want to bear the liability, they should have you sign a waiver. Hey, this isn't our policy. We're not going to violate your constitutional right, but we're not going to indemnify you. You're responsible to get your own insurance. And should anything happen as a result of you carrying that firearm, you are indemnifying us. And I understand a company taking that statute, like that stance on it. And I think that's something I would do as a business owner, but I wouldn't tell anybody what they could or couldn't do, Other thing, Chris Mercado. We're going to get off soon. We've been going a while, guys. I got a lot of shit to do today too. So, but Chris, I just want to point this out because I think this is just great around the discussion. I retired after 28 years. I did a stint in OMAP. OMAP is the Office of Management Analysis and Planning inside of the NYPD. It was the think tank at one time. Now that has been replaced by the Strategic Initiatives Division, which is now the progressive think tank of the woke NYPD. So he says remote gun detection technology based on thermal imaging was available, but they shot it down during Ray Kelly's administration. So again, it just shows, I think what Chris is just pointing out here is that Kaz Daughtry's technology is very outdated, and he's presenting it as if this revolutionary technology. And let's not all forget K5, the transit robot. The future is now. The police officer of the 21st century, right? The new transit cop, Eric Adams touted, Kemper touted it. It was definitely more effective than Eric Adams was at being a transit police officer, but it only lasted a few days. And even with that, he still had a better career than Eric Adams did, even though he had to be accompanied by a lot of police officers like Eric Adams does and his appointed do currently. So, but I think at the end of the day, I think what you're going to see of these scanners is they're going to end up in the broom closet like K5 did.
Well, it's like most things that happen with the police department. We see trends and we see fads, but it's because Kaz Daughtry has to find significance and purpose in his position, right? Because anytime that you're in a leadership position, you have to put your foot and you have to put your fingerprints on stuff to show that you actually are in charge. So for him, they've navigated, manipulated to where he's supposed to be the commissioner for technology. But again, none of this technology is brand new. It's the same thing. Even when the ShotSpotter came out, people thought, oh, wow, this is impressive. This is new technology. In 2003, when I was in Iraq, we had the ShotSpotter detection. So it's nothing new. It's new to him because he's just completely inadequate, doesn't even understand what's going on with technology. Again, it's just completely ridiculous. I think it's a great statement. I appreciate it, Chris. And back to the other question, I agree with you. Talking about the firearms again, I think it's a case by case basis depending on the agency. I agree. If you're a fireman, you don't want. That's what I was saying. You don't want your firearm on you. It could be a safety issue. You go to hot zones. I mean, I don't know if the gun could melt because of the hot zones they're going to. And as I said, as an EMT, you might need it depending on your work, or you might not, depending if you're dealing with some emotionally disturbed people who are grabbing at you. You could, and you're not there to face that adversary, that emotionally disturbed person, to have an encounter to get them in cuffs. You're there to provide medical aid. So, but concealed carry, just to have the concealed carry, I think all should have the concealed carry, especially off duty. But that was a great point. The home health aide, I think a home health aide would be a great person to have a firearm also, because you're there protecting yourself and you're protecting someone's home. You're in their domain. But that's why I think it's a case by case basis. It would have to be for safety purposes. And as far as the liability for companies, I agree. I think that would be a great opportunity to have them sign a waiver so the liability is done on the company. And with that being said, I want to thank the viewers today. I appreciate all the questions, the engagement, the interaction. The questions are great. I know a lot of retired guys are thinking about their life on the job and their experience, and you can compare it to what's going on right now. It's just a shame what's going on. We see the evolution of generations change. We always talk about my experience and my time, but I will say what's going on right now is far different than any other generation even the meat and potatoes to myself and John with the police department. Because over time, as we evolve, rules and policies change, but now law has changed, and law has changed completely. It's just made a 180 where it's pretty much impossible to be a police officer. Again, look at these Democrats throughout the entire nation, especially Gavin Newsom, who administered the Munchausen syndrome by creating the illness and then treating the symptoms. It's just sick ideology that we have to watch what's going on with these Democrats right now. I appreciate engagement talking about concealed firearms. Again, I do recommend for the police officers for your own tactics. I do recommend that you conceal your firearms and conceal it to where people actually don't know that you have it. And if you ever need it, you know where it is. But also, with that being said, train. Wherever you conceal it in the same location every time. All right? You can't change the location of your concealed carry depending on what clothes you're wearing. You have to change your clothes by where you keep your firearm. Your firearm should be concealed in the same place every time. You should train with a dry firearm. Take the ammunition out and train how to get to your firearm, how to get it out, how to get it in and out of that holster when you're off duty, just as you would on duty. So you have to make your clothes conducive to how you conceal that firearm, not make your firearm conducive to the clothes that you're wearing. It's an unfortunate byproduct, but it's also a luxury that you actually have that firearm. Well, not even a luxury. You should have that firearm. Legal, obliging citizens, if you have the opportunity, you should carry a firearm, but train with that firearm. Train how to shoot it, train how to carry it, train how to remove it, train how to hold it in your hands. To all the people out there, your comments, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Wait. Before we go, one more. Sorry.
You got one more? Bring them on. What do you got?
One more thing. John just sent us a video. I think it relates to the scanners. We should bring it up. And I just want to bring in,
Awesome.
I just bought, I didn't just buy, I bought a few months ago, the Ruger LCP2. That gun, I think that's a great conceal gun because I wear extra medium shirts and I wear shorts a lot. So that is it's a pocket gun. You can keep it in a pocket holster, but you got to train that, right? Now you got to train what are you going to do in a pocket holster? Not as quick as carrying on your hip, but a lot more concealable. In wintertime, I always carry on my hip. When it comes to summer, though, you have to dress the part. The last thing you want to do is people to be able to see you, right? To be able to notice that you have a gun in your pocket. Like my goal, I think, all the times of carrying is that a trained eye still can't see my gun, right? And that's, you don't ever want to index. You don't ever want people to be able to see it. I just want to bring in this video real quick, sent in by John. Ray Kelly's NYPD's terahertz scanners and stop question frisk. I never watched it. I don't know what's on it, but let's just talk about this for 2 seconds. It just seems interesting since we're on the topic anyway. Let me bring that up. All right, here we go. I'm gonna unmute it and play it.
Frank just said that if instead of having stop and frisk, there were just a more automatic way. If you could detect people with guns, that would be less sort of invasive to personal autonomy. Do you have that technology coming along?
Funny you should ask, though. We are looking at something, and we've been looking at it for several years, but working with the Metropolitan Police and DARPA, the federal government in DOD research component. It's called terahertz technology. And what it does in essence, everybody emits terahertz radiation. And what it does do is enable you to see someone, say, carrying a weapon. The problem is, so far, the device that has been developed is too big and it doesn't have the range. But we know what cell phones were like in 1986. Look what they're like now. So we believe that the technology will only get better. And that would be a major breakthrough as far as finding weapons on the street.
Can you imagine 10 years from now that technology being deployed around the city? So just like you have cameras recording where people go, you could notice that somebody with a gun is moving in a certain neighborhood?
Not without a major fight. I think the legal we're talking. Our lawyers are looking at it. The issues of obviously Fourth Amendment issues are involved there. But this is something you do in increments, and I don't know if 10 years from now you'd see them, positioned all over. We have to develop the technology, and I think there would be concerns raised by
When you have privacy
advocates.
concerns down in Lower Manhattan, you actually have privacy advocates sitting with you. How do you do that? Do you have in your department sort of specialists in privacy and ethics issues that you discuss with?
No, we don't have privacy advocates sitting down there,
Yeah.
but we do have attorneys that focus on this. The protocol that I mentioned was put together by our attorneys. So obviously we live in the most litigious city in the world. So we have to be very aware of potential litigation and ongoing litigation, and certainly privacy issues are among them.
It's actually a great video. I appreciate who's that? John, who sent the video?
Yep, that was John.
Yeah, I think it's great because it's interesting, right? He's actually talking about what we're saying here on the podcast, safety versus liberty, and he's doing what we should expect from someone in a leadership position, right? He's not. I will give him credit in the sense he's saying I'm not in opposition to it. Say, hey, this is a great tool, but before we use this resource, we actually have to have calculated decisions and actually have to analyze it and look at the big picture. Are we invading people's privacy? Are we being too intrusive on the Fourth Amendment? Are we possibly violating the Fourth Amendment? Which is quite interesting that we got to this point, right? Because, so I want to read, there's an article here, and it's about the weapon scanner in the subway. And there's a little excerpt here. I think it's interesting. Michael Gerber, the Deputy Commissioner for Legal Matters at the Police Department, said city officials were confident that the technology was legal and accurate. They will not alert New Yorkers in advance about where the scanner will be stationed. So it's quite interesting that that's the response that we have in comparison to where Ray Kelly said, well, we really need to explore this and see what the legal ramifications are, that we came to this point that they're confident that they have the legality. What I gathered by that statement is they really haven't looked at the big picture at all, and that we have an administration right now that just doesn't oblige by any rule. The vaccine mandate, we see it with various different things. So it doesn't surprise me. But again, I mean, look at the difference between Ray Kelly and what we see now in the poise and the stoicism and the professionalism and actually having real conversations in comparison to what we see now. Great video, John. I really appreciate it.
That was great. Honestly, that brought the conversation full circle, right? So this technology is super old, right? Like our other friend told us, super old. It's not, this is under the Ray Kelly administration, and they were talking about privacy concerns at that point. Because again, why am I getting scanned? Let's talk about people that don't carry firearms. Why are their bodies getting scanned? This other dude was like, oh yeah, take away my safety so that and pour radiation on my body to make sure that I don't have a firearm on me when it's my God-given right to in this country, right? It's a natural born right. It's not, forget the founders. This is a natural born right given from God, the right to defend yourself. But people support scan me, daddy. Scan me, daddy. Make sure I'm safe, daddy. We're doing that in the subways, well, in certain subways, because again, this is really more of the perception versus fear thing. Has nothing to do with actually keeping you safe, because it won't. It'll just make people feel better that the scanner's there. And I think Eric Adams even alluded to that at some point when he was talking about the scanners, that it would help alleviate the perception. It would make New Yorkers feel better that they're being scanned. But again, my overall concern is freedom, right? We're not stripping Americans of their Fourth Amendment rights. I don't care what New York City is. I don't care the challenges we face. I don't care the dangers we face. I'm going to choose freedom over safety. I'm going to every single time. I don't believe a tyrant like Eric Adams, or even if he wasn't a tyrant, I don't believe another man should dictate what's good for myself and my family. And I think that we should all kind of be around that. But I think when we look at the larger scale of it, let's even remove that point of the conversation. What are the health ramifications of scanning people consistently all day long. I mean, no one's looking at that. No one's talking about it. And then, cancer rates will skyrocket, and they'll blame climate change. Like, what are they going to blame? It has nothing to do with the fact that your body's getting scanned every second, every day. Plate scanners, easy pass readers, cell phones. Has nothing to do with now we're scanning your body for guns and all this other nonsense. Cancer's up because climate change is bad. But don't worry, Barack Obama just bought another $20 million house 2 feet from the water.
Well, we know we can't trust this administration when it comes to health and safety risk. I mean, at the same point, the science was lacking behind the actual mandate. And of course, Eric Adams pushed it. So what would make this any different? What would make this any different? We don't know the science. We don't know the studies behind this actual scanner, if there are any health ramifications. And I would assume that they are. I mean, just without any medical knowledge, I would assume that there is some form of risk. I mean, there's probably people who would tell you to get more radiation just by standing in the sun. But I would love to actually see what the ramifications are and see what the studies are before we actually minister something. I mean, I would hope that Eric Adams learned from the first go around with the mandate, but no. Again, just show that further he's a czar and a dictator for New York City. And this administration is completely tyrannical and really doesn't care about the public. What they do care is about changing your perception, fighting reality. That's what they care about, is changing your reality, change your perception to make it their reality. And their reality is a lie. It's gaslighting the public. And again, I guess if I was a resident of New York City, if I didn't have any integral knowledge of policing, I would probably think that, well, these scanners might be a good idea. You know, maybe I have to give up some of my freedoms, but it's going to keep us safe. And, if I'm living in New York City, but understanding police work and the silver linings of actually what goes on and how we curb police work, this is just another complete sideshow. This doesn't do anything but displace crime. There was an article recently that Eric Adams is basically playing whack-a-mole. I was really surprised that the paper actually put that out, because that's exactly what they're doing. It's just whack-a-mole. You're not removing crime. I'm sure if we actually looked at some of these crimes that are being displaced from transit, we'll see crime increases in other precincts that are relative because the crime is being displaced. Again, this is a complete failure by this administration. That's a great video. Again, I want to say thank you to John. Shout out for putting that video out. Look, I don't know what year that video was, but he's saying 10 years from now. So sure enough, that's what we expect from our leadership, is exploring all avenues, looking at the big picture, having real conversations, not just talking about Windex and talking about when you were fingerprinting when you really didn't. So am I saying Ray Kelly was perfect? No, but he sure was a leader, and he was the commissioner, right? Unlike what we see right now. We knew the leadership back then. There was a vision, there was a pyramid, and Ray Kelly did lead the department.
That video was 10 years ago, a decade ago. So, yeah, pretty wild. Well, it was uploaded to YouTube. It could even be older than that, right? Because Ray Kelly was not the commissioner 10 years ago.
That's what I'm saying. I know he says 10 years, but it's probably even more time elapsed, because exactly what is it? In YouTube, Ray Kelly's been gone. How long has it been now?
Actually, you know what? Maybe he was, because you know what? I have a photo with him when I got promoted in 12. So maybe he was still the commissioner. No, he wasn't, because Bloomberg comes in 13.
13,
so,
yeah, sure.
Yeah. So there was probably a year past. So maybe whenever
time goes quick, man. Getting old goes fast.
Absolutely, brother. All right, listen, this is going on 2 hours. This is a long one, fellas. Thanks for staying with us. I'm gonna post this pre-recorded on Twitter, so you people on Twitter, we can't see the comments. It's pre-recorded. Apologize for that. Blame Elon Musk. It was only because I changed my photo to include my nice gray.
Did you pay it?
I paid for Twitter so that we could do that, and now I want a refund.
Bills are unpaid.
So anything before we go, Eric? Guys, thank you. I appreciate it.
Listen, I appreciate the interaction, the engagement with the live viewers. Thank you so much. If you like our content, please subscribe to it, whichever platform you choose. If you're a hater, listen, come on this podcast. Let's have some real conversations. But for you out there, if you want Kaz Daughtry and John Schell to come on this show and have a real conversation, advocate for it. Put in the comments. Believe me, they're watching. They're looking. If you're one of our viewers, one of our one of our fans, if you support us on social media, put it out on social media that Kaz Daughtry and John Shell should come on this show. That's what we need. Real leadership would come on this show. That's what we should expect. And even if they come on this show in spite of the rhetoric that they put out about this podcast, we'll still treat them professional. Again, I don't have to respect them, but I will show them respect. And that's how we should treat people. So again, thank you so much. New York Finest Unfiltered Podcast, your 265 Police Live series. Thank you, everyone. Shout out.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 Blue. That's 888 901 Blue.